Hey everybody, Economic Ninja here. I hope you're doing well. We have got a lot of news to cover. I have got a lot of notes. I want you to understand this first and foremost. The last story is most important because it shows you exactly where we are, where the Western civilization and Western economies are right now, as opposed to the East. Very important to realize where we are as a nation economically. Listen, if you have never thought about your financial future or you're thinking about it and it's on your mind right now, you need to really focus on it because there is a plan around the world by both governments and money managers to make you poor and scared. I'm not joking. They say by 2030, you're going to eat bugs, you're going to own nothing, and you're going to like it. That is totally not what I'm about. I am the Economic Ninja. I am about you becoming prepared and not scared and taking advantage of this. Wealthy people know that you make more money during crashes and downturns in the economy than when the economy is booming. And I want to show you that. So if you want that kind of information and you want it brought in a little bit different way, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon. I'd really appreciate it. All right. Got a lot of news. Let me get a little bit of coffee first. What I want you to understand is this. We are now bombing or firing missiles in Syria. There are governments that are trying to start a world war. Why? Because at the very end of an economic cycle, when all else fails, as Gerald Celente would say, they take you to war. You have to understand how serious these times are. 2024 is going to be very dark, very scary for most people, but they will not be scared if you are prepared. People that are ready for this and are ready to take advantage of this will become wealthy. All right, so check this out. Here we go. We got some notes. There is nothing fancy about me. Those that have whiteboards, I got cardboard. All right, here we go. Again, the last story I think is the most important, but the first one's out of Zero Hedge. This is entitled UMich, or University of Michigan. Inflation expectations explode higher in October. Consumer frustration appeared everywhere. Okay, we have to realize that even if you are doing well, type 1 if you're doing well, you're making it. The inflation sucks, but you're making it. Type 2 if this inflation has totally swamped you and you are looking for ways out of this sort of trap that has been set with inflation. Remember, inflation is a hidden tax that governments put you through. It says it's primarily October data. UMich inflation expectations for the next year surged to 3.8%. By the end of the month, the financial data showed it had spiked to 4.2%, which is the highest reading since May of 2023, with the medium-term expectation at 3%. Just think about that. Back in May of 2023, a 30-year mortgage was like 5.5%. It is now over 8%. Crazy. Says consumer sentiment confirmed this early month reading, falling back about 6% this October, following 2 consecutive months of very little change. Hey, type 3 if you like the cardboard notes. I'm just curious. Type 4 if you don't like them. I'm going to go back and look. This decline was driven in part by higher income consumers and those with sizable stock holdings, consistent with recent weakness in equity markets. You know, it's interesting when they talk about people with sizable stock positions. I'm going to do a story on my brother's channel. I'm going to go over to my brother's channel, the Real Estate Ninja. Check it out. It's going to come out in about 20 minutes after this, and it's going to be about Jamie Dimon liquidating a ton of his bank stocks, JP Morgan's bank stocks. And there is a specific reason why, and people need to understand this. Most people are sheep, and financial sheep, and they just fall off the cliff with the rest of people. That's why we have crashes. This is going to be the first collapse, especially a large crash, that people around this country are going to be prepared, because I am going to use my 4 years experience as an investor, as an accredited investor, as a real estate agent, I owned a brokerage. I've done a lot of stuff. I'm going to get you ready for this. And it's not because I'm something special. I've just been there and done that. Type 5 if you were getting ready or you saw it ahead of time too in 2008 or before 2008. Type 6 if you wish you would have been ready for that. Because, quite frankly, you would have been picking up assets for pennies on the dollar. It says here, across all consumers, 1 year expected business conditions plunged 16%. Think about this. 1 year expected business conditions plunged 16%, and expectations over consumers' own personal finances in the year ahead fell 8%, reflecting ongoing concerns about inflation and, to a lesser degree, uncertainty over implications of the news, both domestically and abroad. We're entering a world war. This is not a joke. It's getting very serious. Now, when we're talking about business expectations and we're talking about inflation getting in crazy. We're at a moment where the Fed is saying they're going to keep rates higher for longer, but it seems like the words that are coming out of the Fed governors, it's this, we're closer to a pause. We're closer to a pause than keep raising rates. Now, I believe we're going to keep raising rates, but the last story I'm going to tell you is directly showing you what the Fed's about to do, okay? This is going to be really interesting for you, I think. It says here, signs of consumer frustration over inflation appeared throughout the interviews. Year ahead gas price expectations reached their highest reading since June of 2022, which is 80%. Over 80% of consumers specified that inflation would cause greater hardship for consumers in the year. Ahead, ahead than employment, the highest share since 11 months. About 47% of consumers blamed high prices for eroding their living standards up from 39% and the highest share in 15 months. This is only going to damage the greatest wealth effect in history, housing. The housing wealth effect is being damaged. Homes across the country right now, median home price is down 15.7% since the peak in October of 2022. This is very important for you to realize. Already, right now, the median home price has fallen on a percentage level across the country greater than the Great Recession. This is happening right now. If you want to take advantage of that, you've got to prepare now. You've got to be ready. I'll throw some more 80% off links to the real estate crash course down below. It's $199. If it's not $199, that means it's not 80% off, okay? You have to get ready for this stuff. All right. Next thing, check this out. Michigan plant closing. This comes from Patty. She emailed me, said, I thought you might find this interesting. This was announced in my city, and the town is literally shocked. 1,200 jobs gone. To Mexico. We've heard, but not verified yet, this tire plant has been here since the 1960s, and they are reducing it to just a rubber factory now. We are watching history unfold so crazy and scary for the sleeping, unprepared masses. Now, this is just one example of a company laying off 1,200 people. Check out their press release. This is out of, it's the Amador or Ardmore, Michigan plant. Michigan North America announced that it will begin winding down production at the Ardmore plant with the goal of completing the process by the end of 2025 or sooner. Rubber mixing operations at the plant are expected to continue. In a press release, Michigan indicated it is committed to supporting the employees and community and its partners. Yeah. The point is that this economic crash has already started. We saw a massive tech layoff happen last December and January, right? We saw a massive banking crisis where banks failed. The FDIC had to come in and bail out the depositors, and it was so bad that the FDIC says, we're out of money. Then later in the spring, the FDIC comes out and says, hey, banks, we need you to pay higher rates of insurance so that we can recapitalize the FDIC. They're insolvent. They don't have the money for any more bank crashes. Then the Fed, think about this timeline this year. The Fed comes out and goes, you know what? The small banks, they don't have enough money to pay the higher rates, so we're going to make all the big banks do it. Then Bank of America comes out and says, oh my, Brian Moynihan, the CEO of Bank of America, it's like, are you kidding me? We can't deal with these higher prices. Then the Fed comes out and goes, okay, now we also we're going to make gold a tier one asset, which hasn't been there for decades and decades. We're going to make it a tier one asset, and we want all banks to hold more in reserves, approximately 3% more. You're not allowed to gamble everybody's money. We need you to just hold back 3% more for more stability in the banking sector, okay? Because the banking sector is collapsing. Then Bank of America comes out and goes, and Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan also says, if you make us hold 3% more in reserves and you don't let us gamble everyone's money, this is what they're meaning. We're not going to be able to compete with these other banks. We're going to be in trouble. All the while this year, the Federal Reserve has had their repurchase window open wide, and they have stated that over 700 banks came to them, not this last September, but the September before, and said, we're insolvent, we need help. That's why the repo window's open. And then the Fed said, not only are we not going to tell you what banks are collapsing, which banks are insolvent, we're not going to tell you for up to 5 years after we stop helping them, because they are so afraid Type 7 if you understand that this is very serious what's going on, yet none of your family and friends know about it. And thank you to everybody that hit the thumbs up right now and is chatting it up in the live stream to get this algorithm woken up. Because for some reason, social media doesn't want to share this information. I don't know a whole lot of people out there that are warning and showing people the exact same cycles that happened in 2006 to 2008 and then how to crush it on the other side. Why? Because the wealthy want to crush it. The governments around the world want to crush it, and they want to crush you. That is exactly what's going on here. I make no qualms about it. This is a plan that has been put forth decades ago to crush you. This is crazy stuff. All right, we got a couple more stories. Now, this is very important to understand about interest rates. Okay, when a government or a central bank, and our government and central bank are not the same thing. The Federal Reserve is not federal. It has no reserves, okay? It's a Ponzi scheme. It's a lie. All right. When they start raising rates, they always do lower rates for a long period of time, get a bunch of people sucked into debt and over leverage, and then they start to ramp it up, and they give you reasons because they say, oh, inflation has ticked up. Oh, prices are getting too hot. We need to slow it down a little bit. And they start ticking up. What you don't realize is that's actually a legitimate plan to crush you. And they make so much money taking back your house and selling it again because of lending requirements and a fractional reserve banking. People just don't get it. Because every time money is created, it's created because it's created into existence out of debt. When you go get a mortgage, it's just poof, there it is, here's the money, and it's owed back with interest. And as you pay it back, they get to actually create more debt based on it, like 9 times. It's insane how this world works, this monetary system. It is a total trap, all right? So when they start to raise rates, that's when they want to see you lose everything. And they come back, oh, it sucks, you got over leveraged. And knowing human behavior, that you're never gonna go sit there and go, oh, I got totally screwed, they did it to me. It's like, well, I shouldn't have got myself in that debt. And they know you're going to stay quiet, so nobody ever revolts, right? Okay, well, now these 3 stories, the last one being the most important, are very important. Check this out. Turkey. How many people care about Turkey? Not many, right? You should. It says Turkey raises interest rates for the 5th time in as many months. It says Turkey has raised interest rates for the 5th time since June as the country steps up its battle against inflation, and the threat of escalating conflict in the Middle East poses a fresh challenge to policymakers. The central bank on Thursday increased the benchmark 1-year repo rate by 5 percentage points to 35%, matching the expectation of economists in a Reuters poll. This is why you need to understand how important this is. The countries that run the world always have the lowest rates, right? The ones where it is acceptable to hold another country's currency, like, hey, you know what? We find so much faith and confidence in the US dollar, we hold it, or the euro, we hold it. Those countries where other countries have faith and confidence in them, those countries enjoy lower rates overall. Whereas opposed to third world nations and other nations that other countries don't desire to hold their debt, their rates are much higher, right? So the reason why 35% is important in Turkey is it's just as important as this next story, and then I'm going to elaborate a little more. Russia just raised its interest rate to 15% after steep climb in inflation. Russia's central bank has increased interest rates by more than expected to 15%, more than expected, right? After a steep rise in inflation. The bank blamed the war-torn economy's limited capacity to respond to an increase in consumer demand for the rise in inflation to 6.6% in October from 6% in the previous month. Even with the increase in borrowing costs, inflation is expected to carry on climbing to 7.5% by the end of the year, the central bank said, before falling back to 4% next year. All right, this is why it's important. There are countries that understand because they've dealt with inflationary times more than the US. This is really only our 2nd major bout. It's actually, if you count the Roaring 20s, it's our 3rd. We had a major bout of inflation in the 20s as the Roaring 20s has happened because of easy credit. People spent like crazy. They didn't care. It was, they're partying like it was 1899 again. The 1970s, the same thing. Debt became cheap. The closing of the gold window by Nixon, we had a run-up of inflation. Now we have this. This inflation bout is worse than the previous 2. What Russia's doing right now is they're trying to squelch it right now, and all they're doing is saying, look, if you want to borrow money, it's going to cost you a ton of money to borrow. So it's going to crush the consumer from going out and spending more. Our GDP just exploded higher. Why? Because the consumer is completely lost. And they are blowing money like you wouldn't believe. But what's really scary is how much our government is blowing. Our government is taking out debt at massive, massive tranches. They're pulling out tons. They're trying to sell bonds. And the reason why is because they know that nobody is about to buy our bonds. So they're trying to get every money market company, every investment fund, every pension fund to soak up these government bonds. I believe there's a day where the government is going to default on these. I don't think it's going to happen in the next year, but I think it's coming soon. In the next few years, you're going to see government defaults. I know it sounds crazy, but I don't care. I'll put myself on that line. I believe you're going to see that. Governments are going to default with the banks. And other countries are trying to get on top of their inflation super fast. The US and the European Union are not. Now check this last story out. And this is the most important, I believe. And this is why. The European Central Bank holds interest rates steady after 10 consecutive hikes. All right. I teach this I go into depth in the real estate crash course on how to identify real estate cycles and how you overlay the Fed funds rate with consumer spending and a handful of other metrics. Unemployment, things like that. At a certain point, Europe will fall, and then we have about 8 weeks, and then we're going to collapse too. The reason why is because we are so tied in. It might as well be the same central bank. It's the exact same spirit. It's the exact same everything. That bank migrated over here. They got their hands. Europe has their hands into us. The founding fathers tried to fight it and fight it. They lost that fight in the early 1900s when the Federal Reserve came in. 2 other central banks were kicked out of our country prior to that. The Federal Reserve stuck, and within a couple of years, time they had income tax invented. They lied to the people about that too. They said it's only for the rich. Well, let me ask you this. Type 11 if you pay income tax, federal or state. Type 12 if you pay income tax and you believe that you are not wealthy. That's how they conned the entire nation, all right? Well, as these rates go up, when the Federal Reserve or a central bank finally decides to pause, it means it's already crashed. All right, it's already collapsed. If you go back and do a chart of go to the St. Louis Fed and do a historical chart of the Fed funds rate, and then you see the overlays of the recessions announced, they always start lowering rates 1 quarter before the official recession. So the first step to that is a long pause. So the ECB knows, even with inflation skyrocketing, they've already broken the back. Europe is collapsing right now. And it's very important to know that because we come next. Now, I believe that we're going to be a handful of quarters past. But what people don't realize is that Germany actually fell into a deep recession and had to do all of its debt, a bankruptcy, if you will, back in 2005. And I was following that as I was starting to liquidate my real estate holdings. The reason why I started liquidating my real estate holdings because in mid-2005, Germany went through a massive, massive recession and it constricted. Well, it was very strong in the European Union. Most people don't remember this. It went very unreported. Those ripples of those write-downs came across the Atlantic and hit us in our country. And it's very important for you to understand this because a handful of years later, after we went through our Great Recession, Europe was picking on Cyprus and Greece, and they were ripping on them. And Germany was the head honcho. And Germany was just the big bully. Germany has a history of being a bully. I don't know if you know that. It's true. There's like a spirit of being a bully over there. And nobody pointed to them and said, wait a minute, you caused us all to crash a long time ago. But in 2012, 2014, they were hailed as the strongest economy. It was simply because they just had all of their debt rewritten. So of course they were strongest. But see, most human beings have no comprehension of how that works. So right now it says inflation is still, this is the ECB talking about this. The inflation is still expected to be too high for too long and domestic prices remain strong. At the same time, inflation dropped markedly in September, including due to strong base effects, and most measures of underlying inflation have continued to ease, it said in a statement. So think about this. The ECB just said, hey, inflation is going to go way too high for too long. but we're going to stop raising rates. Why? Because they know the end is nigh. They know that moving into 2024 is going to be an epic crash. It will happen both in Europe and in the United States. Point being is that they are telling you they're not going to raise, they're holding off, even though they know inflation's going out of control. They know they broke the back of the consumer. Next is going to be rush to food. You need to have food right now because there's going to be supply chain deficits with wars around the world coming this next year. You are going to see people rushing to hoard food. You need to go buy food. Have yourself 6 months to a year, and don't go crazy. Like buy stuff that's going to last, like canned goods, right? And then you need to save money aside. If you've already prepared, then start preparing for this real estate crash. And I don't know of any better way than to be getting out of debt and some long-term planning right now. If you want the course, I'll put the 80% off links below. If you don't, that's totally fine. But you need to get around solid people that are solid thinkers, especially those that have been invested in the last real estate market when it was booming and actually crushed it by selling and have been waiting for this moment. And I have been waiting for this moment for 12 years, and I am so excited. I can't wait to watch you crush it. All right, with that being said, I thank you so much for watching. Thank you to all the new subscribers. I'm gonna go over to Real Estate Ninja, and I'm gonna do a video on his channel, The Real Estate Ninja, about Jamie Dimon dumping all of his JP Morgan stock, or not all of it, but a pretty sizable amount, and what's going on behind that. All right, with that being said, the Economic Ninja is out.